And we are on.
We are on.
Can everybody hear each
Welcome.
other?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. So we've got the lovely Claire Mount with us today. So, Claire, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do for a living, or
It's a blind date, isn't
it
it?
just? I love interviewing people, so the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Claire Mount. Thank you for inviting me here today to be with you. It's really lovely to be able to share something about a topic that I feel is super important. So who am I? Well, my name I've just said, and I live in Worcestershire in the town of Redditch. And I haven't always lived here. I lived for 6 years in the Canary Islands in Lanzarote, beautiful island of Lanzarote. And over the last probably 8 or 9 years, I've been helping mainly women, but business owners that are in touch with, I would say, their spiritual side. Now I think I actually want to work with, and I claim this, spiritual entrepreneurs to really grow their business. Life hasn't always been simple. I haven't always done that. I've spent many years in corporate working through IT and management. So, but for me, technology and people, combining them together is what my strength is, and the psychological side of how we use IT. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, and I think one important thing to mention is I am 52 years old. I had to think then.
Brilliant.
And I think that's relevant to the conversation today as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
perfect. So, okay then, what would you like to tell us about your menopausal, peri-menopausal journey?
Okay, so perimenopause is something, first of all, that is a word that we see in media. Interestingly, I'm not sure that many of us talk to each other about it though in real life. That's my first experience. And sometimes we go through symptoms or funny things happening that we brush aside, and we carry on with busy life, and not realizing how much potential damage I think we could be doing to ourselves by carrying on in this business and not talking. So for me, I think the first thing, and we were just saying this beforehand, was these. Now, I've worn glasses since I was a child, and only needed them for long distance and occasional headaches, because I have astigmatism as well. So I have to watch on a computer, I can get eyeache. However, when I went for my normal eye test, I realised that I couldn't see very well in the close up. So what I was doing was my reading was doing this, getting further and further and further away. And that was probably one of the first signs for me of perimenopause. And that's horrible. We just put the glasses on. But the thing is, I think that for me, that the next big thing was migraines. And that was huge because, sorry about this. I have.
There we go.
Cheers.
Back again. My mum decided to just phone me.
Bless her.
Okay. So yeah, migraines, because I've had migraines since I was 19, but I started noticing they were coming around the same time as the monthly period. So there was definitely a cycle in that. Mm-hmm. And they got worse and worse and worse. And now I've taken things like Immigrant sumatriptan for many years, but I noticed they weren't working that well around that time. And when I moved to Lanzarote, I was 45, and I was probably about 46, and I started getting really, really like days in bed type migraines that no matter what I did or what I took, it wasn't making any difference. And that was just really debilitating. And anybody that has migraines knows that. But the thing is, now I realise that so many people are suffering with that same thing.
Yeah, I think going back to that, we've both, I was very similar. In fact, I think I was 19 or 20 when I first had migraines, and then thankfully they stopped kind of mid-20s, maybe a bit later, and I hadn't had anything since. But again, through perimenopause, I don't actually refer to them as migraines. I refer to them now as hormonal headaches, because it's very much linked, and I know what you mean, and they last for days, and it's like nothing sometimes I find that it's not like a head thumper, but it's always in the distance, like a thunderstorm, just ready, and you don't know when it's going to get bad or whether it's going to drift away. And then all of a sudden it's just gone, and it's like you can hear angels singing, because it's oh, that's nice, it's gone.
Yeah.
Like for me, I've never suffered with bad heads, and I think it was last July, I started to get really, really bad heads, but it was mainly just on the one side. And I think if you've never suffered with headaches, you start to panic, because it's like, well, what's going on? This doesn't feel right. I've got a lot of friends who have suffered with migraines. My friend Ruth would often say, if we're on a night out, she'd go, "You'll have to leave me for 20 minutes because I've gone blind." I mean, that would just freak me out. It's like, really?
Yeah.
And this would not go, and it was like my head was in a vice. And then, like you say, it would start to ease off after a period of time, and I don't get that every month, thank God. God.
Yeah. And interestingly, I found ways of there were certain things that I did or tested that really made a huge difference, absolutely massive difference. I mean, I also at around the same time started suffering with very bad kidney pain, and it very weirdly, and I suspect it was linked to the change in the hormones. Literally the tube and the way that my kidney was connected to the bladder was grown in the wrong place. So it'd been there since I was born, but it didn't cause a problem until I got to be 46. And again, I think that was linked. I mean, I ended up having surgery on it 3 years ago. But that again, I think may have well been linked, because I couldn't work out why it didn't become a problem, as a child. Many children that have this problem that I found as babies, obviously nowadays they use ultrasounds and scans and find these things out, but I'd had it for years, no problem. So very strange. In terms of the change in hormones, it's when I look back, when I was in my late 30s, I'd had really horrible monthly heavy pains and everything. And my consultant suggested a hysterectomy, and I'm very badly reflecting back, that I try a chemical menopause. So they injected me with something that stopped all hormones. And that was a real shock to the system, because I went instantly into having hot flushes like I've never had them bad as since, actually. Hot flushes and complete nervous anxiety and everything. So I was kind of like aware of how the body might change once menopause came around. But what I would say, it is a gradual thing, and for many of us, I don't think we kind of put two and two together and go, this is probably because of the effects of perimenopause. And I joke now and say, back as I've got teenage daughters, and say that the hormone issues that teenagers go through, and we go through as women and girls when we're in our teens, actually is almost like the slope up, and then the slope down is the perimenopause. And in fact, the same issues that I see in my teenage daughters, it's almost like what I feel that we suffer and go through in perimenopause.
I've said exactly the same. I've said, when you're starting in, like you say, you can feel the tension, you can feel the build up, and on your way out, the only way to describe it for me, sometimes I feel like I'm cruising along on an aeroplane, and then I'll drop, and when I drop, everything drops. So your energy levels, like your skin goes to pot, your hair goes to pot, everything literally just drops, and then it levels out again for a while. So I do get that, totally get that.
And I think the more women that we talk to during, with the podcast and everything, and I kind of, I hear more and more how many women have had hysterectomies, and it kind of makes me think: is it really, really common? I genuinely, I'd like to look into it a bit more actually, because I don't know, but I know of a hell of a lot of people. So
Yeah.
so you didn't have the hysterectomy, you had this
No.
injection instead of.
It was just a temporary thing. Yeah, it lasted 3 months, and I have to say I was so glad it was over, and it put me off completely. And now, my mum had a hysterectomy, and I now am more educated and learned that most women have HRT as part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a very sharp a welcome to what life will be like one day. Luckily, I can say now, I'm almost, I would say, my 1 year of being in menopause, that it's not like that. It's not as sharp as that.
Good.
But however, I think that what we don't appreciate enough is how long that period is from perimenopause starting to menopause, and it's different for everybody. And that's the other thing. When I was last year talking with my partner, he was saying that his ex-wife, he was in contact with, was saying that her menopause had started, her perimenopause and problems, and she was only 40. So it's really obvious that, again, one, we don't talk about these things enough, and secondly, that it affects everybody differently. So one of the things I did when I started getting the really bad migraines is to think, okay, I've got to think about lifestyle. And I happened to do like a 9-day cleanse. I'm not going to mention the company or anything, but it was like with aloe vera. And one thing I noticed out of doing that was that suddenly my period was way better. And I didn't have migraines. I thought, okay, this is interesting, because it's clearly around something around what I might be eating. Okay, so I've always been fairly active. So I don't think I did anything different. But so what I then did, I think it was 4 years ago, was I cut out everything in my diet that could be, and what I'd read about, a contributory factor to migraines. And I cut out gluten, dairy, caffeine, alcohol, sugar. I think that was it. For 2 weeks, and started feeling better. And I thought, well, I'm kind of like missing eating certain things here. And I I think I had ice cream first. I thought, okay, I feel good. Didn't affect me. And gradually tried different things. And what I realized was gluten was a huge problem for me. Wow. And then absolutely huge problem. And I would recommend anybody that suffers now with bad migraines, and I'm not talking about that monthly headache, I'm talking about when you are vomiting, when you're in bed and you can't move type migraines, to try testing things in their diet to see whether it, that could help. It didn't get rid of them, but it did mean it was way more manageable.
That's really, really interesting, because I think a lot of people, and we're not generalizing here, but there's a lot of people that will just go to the doctors, be given prescription drugs, and just be sent home to deal with it, because they don't know of anywhere else to go or what to do. And I think when you look online, there is so much information, so much conflicting information, and we're all different. We're all going to have very, very different experiences. We found, since doing this, the amount of symptoms we didn't even know existed. It's like I had never even heard of perimenopause. I thought you went straight into menopause. I didn't even realize it was a transition. And I think, again, this is why we want to do these podcasts. It's normal women that are going through experiences and sharing that with other women, because again, we found out that, talking about women going through menopause when they're in the 30s, in the 20s, even, it's like, really, that actually happens. So, it's been quite an eye-opener for us.
And I think for me, you talking about diet, because obviously we've done a hell of a lot of research into this as well, and diet always comes up, doesn't it? And there are like certain things. I know yours was more kind of like for your migraines, but with menopause symptoms in general, kind of like, and we know with everything what we're putting into our body will have an effect. And what you've just said with caffeine and alcohol and sugar, and obviously you're meant to up your, they're called something and I can never remember the word, but it's basically your leafy greens and your broccoli and your kale and
Yeah.
It's called it sounds like crucifix, but cruci something. It's not. Oh, can I just say, talking to me, I do this a lot, Claire. I get words mixed up, and I had to pop to the chemist because my mom's got a bad back, bless her. And I popped to the chemist and they gave us some cream. But I said to them, I said, she was recommended ibuprofen when she had cystitis. And I went, no, not cystitis, sciatica.
Oh my.
So I do. I nearly went into Holland and Barrett and asked for euthanasia instead of echinacea a few years back. So sorry, that's just popped into my head, and that's the
But do you know what? It's funny you saying that, because I think that's another sign and symptom of perimenopause. I really do.
Yeah.
And in talking, when I was working out in Lanzarote, I went to work there because I missed the contact with people. So I went and worked in a bar, and we had such a lot of fun, and it was brilliant. There was like 10 or 11 of us that worked there, a lot of them women around the same age. And actually that is really, really common. Yeah. And I do want to come on to that actually as well.
Okay.
In a bit more detail.
Yeah, so I can't think of the word for your leafy veg, but it does remind me of the word crucifix. Crucibles or something. I don't know. Somebody out there is going to know anyway. It's
I don't know.
Yeah, it's something, but I don't know what
it
is.
Who knows?
But yeah, it's all your kind of your leafy greens, and obviously you're supposed to up that and things like that, which is good for me because I could eat kale till it comes out my ear holes.
Well, I love kale as well. Yeah. I love kale. And actually, going down that route of what we eat, it kind of like it's gluten. Cutting that gluten made a big difference. But the other thing that I started doing about 3 years ago was taking supplements. And when that for me has been an absolute lifesaver. So I take, let me think now, because I take quite a few. I take multivitamins. I take Omega, which has got the GLAs, and if you're looking at like the content of evening primrose oil, which has long been linked with how we balance hormones. I take what's called a cellular renewal, which is a lot of like natural substances in fruits that we just don't eat enough of, things like what's in pomegranates and other things like that. I also take phytoestrogens, which is your estrogens from the plants. And I take a bone nutrient as well, because I'm very aware that, I want to look after and protect my bones as they get older. Now, that sounds a lot. And I sometimes look, and probiotics as well. And I sometimes look and I go, wow, that's a lot. But I have to be honest, I went through a 7-hour surgery in 2018. I took 2 weeks off work and I was back doing heavy, not I had to be careful with heavy lifting, but I was doing heavy work, cooking and for, a lot of customers and things. So I do think the look at the food that we eat is so important. And also, if you can afford to buy organic and you eat lots of raw vegetables and lots of raw fruits, then you're probably getting sufficient. But certainly, I couldn't do that, that amount. I do like my, the stuff that isn't so healthy for us. And I definitely wouldn't be the first to admit that I eat amazingly well. I don't eat gluten though, and that I think does make a difference.
Brilliant. How have you coped with moods? Have your moods been different as you're transitioning through this phase, or you get more are your emotions swinging that much that you've got the real highs and the real lows?
For me, not too much. I know that reflecting back, I was at times very grumpy and a bit picky and a bit awkward. But I don't think I suffered as much as other people. One of my friends had to go on HRT because she was utterly depressed. And one of my another lady I know, one of the people I worked with, was like severe anger. So again, it's something that I do recognise that people should be aware of, that it could be linked to that. Now, I actually do believe that taking the supplements I take actually has made a massive difference to that as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, I knew I was hormonal the other day because I was crying at Dancing on Ice. Wasn't even sad, but there were just moments when you look and you go, oh God, they've done so well. And it was just, and I could have proper broke down. I didn't, because it was just like, come on, Sue.
Yeah.
Woman up.
Well, that's interesting, and also because I think sometimes the outside influences around us do affect our bodies as well, very much so. Back in 2017, I was having the most horrendous periods where I think they were ridiculously heavy. I actually, reflecting back, I remember quite a few years ago sitting in an office with other women, and one of the women was in her early 40s, and all of a sudden she, what we call, flooded. And I was like, how can anybody, that's I didn't understand that. I was early 20s, and I didn't know anything about that. And she was in a bit of a, she had to get her husband to come in and change clothes and everything. It was just that severe. And again, that's something that I don't think people experience, or until it happens to them, they don't know about it.
No, I was exactly the same. And it wasn't until Jackie, one of the other physog that we work with, and I'd said to her that my periods have all of a sudden been a bit all over the place. Like I can have a period for 2 weeks and then nothing for 2 months and everything. And I remember her saying, yeah, it's the menopause. And it wasn't until she said it that I thought, oh my God. And again, with me and Deb doing a lot more research and everything into this, that you automatically, and I think people just think everything's going to stop all of a sudden. But they don't realise that it's going to come heavier and more infrequent or more frequent than it ever has before until it stops. Because you haven't experienced that, have you, Deb?
Well, funny you should say that. I didn't until last Friday.
Oh.
Until last Friday. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, that's because my periods have been very sporadic, especially over the last 2 years. But I put that initially down to I'd had the coil fitted for years, and it takes a while for your system to kind of regulate. But I think I've had more periods in the last 6 months than what I have in the last 2 years. But yeah, on Friday, and when I look back to my moods last week, where I could feel that pent up getting more and more agitated, when I had the release, that was like, now I know. And I think that is the key thing, that going back to the work that I'm going to be doing, is women that haven't got anything to gauge by it anymore. You've got to, you're like, well, where am I in my, where would I be in my natural cycle? Because you will still experience all of those energies anyway. But at least with when I was bleeding, I was like, now I know why. And now I know I'm in that phase. So it's psychologically, you kind of get your head around it. But that's the key thing, is working out where you are anyway. So you understand and recognize yourself before it starts, before that mood kicks in, before you feel like you want to murder somebody, or before you want to throw yourself off a cliff. Whatever your thing is, it's that's where we're at, really. So
and I think going back to that with just general periods, because I've always suffered from PMT, and I would have a period every kind of like 21 days. So for me, it would be a week of being normal, a week of being a monster. And then I couldn't wait until my period started, because exactly what you've just said. As soon as the period started, I was having the period, but I became normal again. So, and that was the way it was. And I used to have to, because I would know exactly when it was going to happen. And I think psychologically used to kind of become the monster, because I just, whether I was or not, I knew that was the week it was going to happen. So whether I was, what's the word? Psychosomatic kind of thing, whether I was kind of creating it because I knew it would be in that week, and it just happened. But it wasn't nice at all. So
well, I'm not so sure it is psychosomatic, because like when certainly I remember 3 years ago, I'd be quite, not horrible, but picky and really pernickety over things in the week before my period. But the thing is, when you're having irregular periods, you've no idea until the period arrives, and then it's like an inner peace almost. That goes, okay,
that's why.
Definitely.
So important to understand where you're at. I'll tell you what's helped me a lot. Over the past few years, I got into taking natural raw cacao. I've done it a couple of times in ceremony, and then what you like, you have it in the cupboard, and I'll fancy a cup of cacao, not really understanding the spiritual benefits of it and the physical benefits. And then back in October, a friend of mine shared a post about doing a 21-day cacao challenge. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to give this a whirl. So I did. Oh my God, completely changed my life. Really changed my life, especially when it comes to moods, because it's such a heart-opening plant medicine that the minute that you take that, instead of the whole idea was to remove your morning cup of coffee or tea and replace it with cacao, to the point now that I am training to be a cacaoista. That's what I want to do, and incorporate that with women, because again, it allows you to release what needs to come up, but it also gets you back into your heart center. And when you're heart centered, and you naturally get that feeling of expressing love, you have more love for yourself. So all of that drama kind of leaves the room. I'm generalizing here. There's a lot more into it, and it's a lot deeper than that. But that is the essence, and that is and it's especially helped me through this lockdown period, because otherwise I know I would have been climbing the wall.
A lot of sense.
I would have been climbing the wall. So so that's another, I think, especially for perimenopausal women, because again, with all the properties that it's got with it, the health benefits are huge, absolutely huge.
Do you know, that makes so much sense, because I always think that if you can come from, it's all, for me, it all comes back to love, and it's about the feelings from the heart. Digressing a little bit, but I dealt with a way of my partner snoring, and that came from a love heart place.
Tell me everything.
It's too long to do now, but it came from a feeling of generating love, basically. And when you do that, you kind of reset a lot of things, I feel. So I totally get how using cacao, because I understand that that's used in particularly in the shaman world, and and that. So I kind of really can understand that, actually, very much so. But interestingly, going back 3 years, I ended up having a period that lasted for 6 weeks. And some of it was very, very heavy, and my iron levels dropped really, really low. And I was close to being having to get a blood transfusion. Luckily, I managed through taking supplements. The doctors had given me iron tablets, and eating liver. I ate an awful lot of liver as well, which obviously if you're a vegetarian you can't do, which probably is your green leafy stuff and spinach and that then. But I couldn't find much information on it as to what could be causing it. And I went to the A&E in the end in Lanzarote, and they checked me out and said nothing really they couldn't find a reason for it. And then the gynecologist said, it's your age. And I was like, oh,
thanks. Wasn't a man by any chance, was it?
It was.
Never understand that, because they don't. I'm not saying that they're not good doctors and stuff, but psychologically they don't understand the way that the women's emotions are all connected. They can't.
This is the thing. At the time, I was going through a hugely traumatic time, because not only had I got my kidney pain, but my partner had diagnosed with a brain tumour, been operated on, had brain surgery, had chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And I was in the middle of trying to support him with everything. So for me, know that I'm pretty sure would have been triggered from that place. Very much so. And then that also then brings me on to the other thing, is that the self-care is so, so important. And I know now that I didn't perhaps spend enough on my self-care, because I always put everybody else first in my family, and I think so many of us are the same though as well.
Do you know what? Sorry to interject, because I because obviously I do my mindfulness classes and everything, and I do like one-to-ones, I do 8-week courses and group sessions, and I'm hearing more and more all the time of everyone, like a majority of women come, but I'd say 90% of them are putting everyone else before themselves. It's human nature, it's what we all do. But I have to keep reiterating exactly what you've just said, Claire, that it's so important to you can't look after someone else if you're not looking after yourself properly. And it's that it's so important. And I think we've been working a lot on this lately, haven't we? Whether it's through what we're doing individually, what we're doing together, but the whole self-care, self-love is so important. Totally agree.
Definitely because again, it's like when you look at the seasons, how we naturally are supposed to work with the seasons, and we don't. We're pushing against it all the time. So I mean, that's another podcast, because obviously it's very deep, but when you're going through all of them, the different archetypes, the different phases of the seasons throughout a 12-month cycle, it's huge. It has such an impact on us, such an impact. And trying to live in a Western fast-paced world, where that's why you're getting a lot of women that are struggling. They are struggling because you're not going back into your own natural way of being, because the expectations to be a wife, or a girlfriend, or a mother, and be at work full time, and have all of that kind of stuff. You're supposed to be superwoman, and sometimes you just want to curl up under the duvet and say,
eat a packet of crisps,
piss off.
Absolutely.
We all try and do it.
There are times when it's very difficult, and I think the situation at home was very, very difficult to have taken self-care, but I don't think it's impossible. And I think it's a bit like self-care for me isn't just mindfulness, though. It's way more than that. It's mindfulness helps massively. Meditation helps massively. I've been very fortunate. My dad taught me to meditate when I was a child. He's always meditated. So I was very fortunate from that perspective. But it's also around looking after your own money, for example. That's a huge part of it as well. So there's and all of those things around us massively affect what's going on in our bodies. I now understand that it's a balancing act, and particularly as you go through menopause, so the peri-menopause, and then you're going through the menopause, because you've got all of the different glands in the body that kind of have to be balanced. The adrenal glands, for example. I'm not anyway kind of like a medical expert, but I am very much aware now that when we are in a state of stress, our adrenals can't help to produce estrogen. And so by allowing all of the outside influences to affect us and not taking control of what we can do, massively affects our bodies.
It's definitely huge, isn't it? Absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. Well, it's been very enlightening today, hasn't it?
Has, informative,
absolutely, really enlightening. No, it's been brilliant. So would you come back on again at another point? Because I think it'd be nice to, we like it when we can revisit people and seeing how they're going through their journeys. We're even starting to interview men, because we've got one guy, bless him, Luke, who's we were only going to record one podcast. He's listened to every podcast that we've done. He loves them. And he's only kind of mid to late 30s. So, but for him, it's the understanding of what to expect. And also he shares his own stories of his own problems, like when he had to go and have a vasectomy. So any woman that's feeling a little bit woe is me, it always happens to us, just listen to Luke's story, because it'll make you feel so much better. And he goes into graphic detail about what happened, so it's great to see the other side.
It is.
And then we're interviewing another guy later, who is an older man who's obviously lived with a woman that's gone through the menopause. So I think it's an all-rounder. It doesn't just happen to women, it happens to the kids, it happens to, you know, it happens to the partners, because we're all having to live together. So it's like, if you can't understand yourself, how can they understand you? They're not even going through it. They just know just to keep quiet at certain times of the day. You know, so no, it'd be great to see how your journey goes.
What you're doing is absolutely amazing, because you're absolutely right that it affects everybody. You know, my partner was doing his own research and was sending me little funny things he thought about women in their 40s and what they're like and everything. But you know, I asked my mum, when did you have your menopause? And she went, I don't know, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so am I suffering the same as you? Or and she either can't remember or won't talk about it. I have no idea. But
she might have breezed through it. You don't know, do you? She might have not even. I know I've spoke to my stepmom, and a good friend of ours, Wendy, said didn't even really know it was happening. You know, so never had a hot flush, mood swings, period stops, and that was it. So
the other thing is that I mean, I would love to come back on actually with you. Is about HRT. It's given as a something that will solve everything. And I have tried it because last year, having moved back from Lanzarote, and again, the state of stress, I think, massively affected the hormones, that I did try it, but I didn't get on with it at all. And I've since stopped it, and recognizing the fact that that stress can affect it, and that if I can calm myself down, hot flushes don't happen. And also by going back on using my supplements again, I manage it. But the worrying thing was when I spoke to the doctor, she actually said to me, oh, most women don't get through menopause without some help from the HRT, from the doctors. And that was it. And, you know, I have to be honest, I had a bit of a scare, because HRT made my one boob kind of like incredibly painful. And I just think it's dished out a little bit in peri-menopause as well. More, and I didn't even realise that.
But I think that kind of happens a lot, though, doesn't it? And especially in the West, it's like, whether it's perimenopause or whether it's menopause or whether it's any other ailment, let's throw a tablet at it instead of, you know, we know this is our hormones changing drastically to allow us to go into the next phase of our life. We totally get that. But surely there's other ways of being able to do it if you don't want to go down that route. And we're not saying that for everyone, because for some, quick and easy option, and if it helps them through, we've got friends who have had, and they were like, they swore by HRT, wouldn't have changed anything. I know I wouldn't feel particularly comfortable with going that way. If I had to, it would be a last resort, but I'd like to explore other options first. And I know you feel the same, don't you? So, you know, so I think we've...
But not putting a dampener on it,
no,
because
not at all. It works for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it was,
so,
for a few weeks, it was a lifesaver for me in many ways, but not a long term. It was like a short-term fix. So,
yeah. No,
and again,
fair enough.
menopause and perimenopause isn't an illness.
No, it's part of life, isn't it? It's part of life, you know.
Yeah.
We didn't have to have all these tablets when we were starting our periods.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Your body was changing to get you into that.
Yeah, we put so much pressure on ourselves. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Claire, for joining us. Before you go, do you quickly want to just mention your business in case any other women out there want to get in touch with you and work with you? We'll put links as well in the podcast. That'll be just the audio
and YouTube.
So, you know, if anyone wants to get in touch with Claire, then that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, I will do. I think the best way, and what I really like, is for anybody to send me a friend request that would like to know more about how I might be able to help them. I help women to grow their business in a very quick way, actually, in the sense that there are things that we spend our time doing that when we have a business can distract us from actually what we need to be doing. And so I help you to grow in a way that enables people to come and find you, rather than you having to go out and kind of do what I call icky marketing. So anybody that has a business that is believing that is here to make positive change in the world, that wants a sustainable way to grow it, please just send me a friend request and just drop me a message. That's the best thing.
Perfect.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will see Claire again at some other point.
We will.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Lots of love.
Thank you. Bless you.
Bye.
Bye.